What's going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Boys. You're here for another Facts Project podcast. Thank you once again. We are here with our very special guest, once again returning, Benjamin Hunting, all the way from Canada. Thank you for being here, sir. By the way, lovely gem shirt, Gem in the Holiday.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. This is of course, the Misfits, the evil band. I didn't watch a lot of Gem when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. But I got into the comic series that came out, I think, in like the mid-2010s.
Yeah, I remember.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's really good. The art was... So it's interesting because I'm not intentionally wearing this, but some of the initial art that Joe Ng and I were putting together for Dead Air, the book we're talking about today, I wanted it to have some of the vitality of the Gem art because that book is also very music-focused. And it's one of the few comic books I've read that really did a great job of capturing what it's like to be in a band and also the energy when you're performing on stage. Is something I used to do when I was younger. So it was I don't know if it was formative for this project, but it was definitely a part of it.
Excellent. Yeah, and to be honest, anything based on a little bit of nostalgia always just tends to bring me back. So that's always a plus. But today, of course, we are here to talk about Dead Air issue 3. Now, me being somebody who was unfamiliar with the project, I thank you for the advanced copies because I got a chance to read into this. And I got to say, the story is fascinating because in the beginning, just reading it as far as Dead Air, just like without understanding the nuances of the comic, I thought it was going to be horror at first. But then
I get that more than you think.
Yeah, but then I felt there was a little bit of a trickle of it a little bit because there's something about it is eerie in a sense because of the build of the story. Now, the original spark that was behind Dead Air, and based on your experiences, because you put a lot basically like in the Kickstarter updates about Canadian radio, about college radio in general, especially 1990s college radio culture. How did that shape the DNA of the story? And better yet, how did that shape the DNA of you?
So the first part of that question, I wanted to write about 90s college radio because it was something that I knew a lot about and was really personal to me. I ended up working at a university radio station when I was still in high school. There was an open audition for new DJs. I was 16 years old. And I went there with a friend of mine, and apparently somehow, and I have no idea how, because, I mean, as a teenager, I was an absolute idiot. But we managed to impress the station manager enough to get a show Friday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. And we played whatever we wanted. It wasn't really a format for it. There wasn't a genre specifically. And I learned a lot about myself and music and whatnot that proved to be pretty formative for me as a person. And I wanted to tap into that energy. But at the same time, when I was putting together the idea for Dead Air, I had the setting, I had the era, but I didn't know the story I wanted to tell. And I didn't want to just tell a straight-up slice-of-life story about these DJs who are working at a station. I wanted it to have unexpected elements, I guess. And I remember, excuse me, I was in my office one night, and I remember running into the kitchen and my then fiance, now wife, sitting there, and I was like, what if one day out of the year you could talk to the dead? And she gave me this big smile, and she's like, yeah, I think you got it. I think that's going to work. And so I took these two ideas, college radio and this very sci-fi kind of concept of a technology that everything winds up one day out of the year and you can get in contact with people who have died. And then I used that to explore a bunch of things that I was interested in, like the idea of friendships over time, what that means, who you were back then, who you are now, and the journey to get to who you are now, and how that can change you and change your relationships with people that you thought you would be friends with forever. And also the idea of technologies that we just get used to, and they're kind of boring now. And I mean, I think a lot about how, for me, video conferencing, like what we're doing right now, if you had told me about this when I was 15, I would have been like, wow, that's amazing. Like, I don't believe that's going to happen. And now it's just in your pocket all the time. You can just pull it out and do it, and it's annoying, and people are trying to get you to get involved, and you're like, no, you just put it away. That is exactly what would happen if there was a technology that let you talk to the dead. You know?
I found that. I found that to be like the most compelling portion of this because you bring forth a product like decalc, and how that concept of basically having one time during the year where you get a chance to speak to the dead, and overall the overabundance of the concept brings forth crowds, kind of like it's like Tickle Me Elmo in the '90s. Just
Yeah,
we gotta go, and there's lines basically outside of decalc. But then you get to the later pages, and it's become just a another boring product because the decalc stations are just rotting away, or they've been turned into something else, like a convenience store or something like that. And or better yet, they was like, oh, well, you can get decalc at home, but it was like an enormous amount of money, almost like a Neo
yeah,
Geo in the
pretty
'90s. They were
much.
like
Yeah,
$200. No, I'm not buying that. You know,
yeah,
like
yeah,
something of that effect. So even like the e-commerce portion of it, even though it was something that was like something that probably everybody wants to do. So the concept of speaking to somebody that is passed on from this world, but only one time during the year, and the fact that you can't do it all the time brought a lot of people to basically be disinterested in it.
yeah. I thought too the idea of I wanted to limit the technology. So in the book, it's text only, right? There's no video. There's no you can't speak to someone with your voice,
Mm-hmm.
and that gives you kind of another layer of believability that people would get bored with it because it's not flashy, it's not engaging. I mean, the phones that we have now, we are just talking about video conferencing. So much of what occurs on our phones is engineered to addict us to respond to certain prompts or notifications and whatnot, keep
Yeah.
us involved in the ecosystem. Then you have something like Detox where it's just like, well, it's a text message and it's there on a terminal and that's pretty much all you can do with it. It's not flashy, it's not glitzy, it's not getting your not acetylcholine, that's not the right thing, dopamine transmitters going.
Yeah.
So yeah,
The other big portion of it that I found was interesting is that the dead that you were trying to reach and communicate with could say no.
yeah, yeah. Uh, that's in there for a couple of reasons. Because first, I'm sure that, and this is something we had fun. You saw it in the book where we have a lot of we use these PSAs or like infomercials from
Yeah.
Detox, and we try to make them as we modeled them after what you used to see on late night TV in the '90s. You see it less today, but it's still out there. It's like a mix between a PSA and a drug ad, where you have people in lab coats saying stuff that gets it's really generic and inoffensive, but the warnings on the bottom of the screen just get more and more involved as time goes on. And we realized that there would always be a portion of people who would just want to talk to famous people. You know, like
Yeah.
they would be beating down their door. I want to talk to Kurt Cobain, or I want to talk to Abraham Lincoln. You know, whatever it is, it would just be unmanageable. So we came up with the idea of all right, there's only a sliding window, like it's like 80 or 90 years. So you can't go back and talk to Jesus or Muhammad or whatever. You can't get the easy answers. And then we're going to make it so if you want to talk to someone famous, you got to prove that you had a relationship with them. They're not just going to let you in, do whatever you want. But the other aspect of letting people say no is it let us do some things dramatically with characters later on in the series that becomes almost a turning point for how it shapes them as people.
Yeah.
Because one of the fun things to do with this book was to take each of the main characters and kind of show how they interact with Detox and how that impacts their life. And being rejected by someone, if you're trying to talk to someone who's dead, you probably cared about them, right? And you assume that there was a mutual level of care and respect in return. If you're rejected in that situation, that's going to have a pretty big impact on you. And that was an interesting way to develop character in the series.
For sure. And the we're talking about basically all the characters in whole. We're talking about pretty much a group of young adults, based pretty much all through college, that are all pretty much centered around the more core character, which is Josie.
Yeah,
And essentially, everything that happens amongst these friends are all derivative to what happens to Josie while
yeah,
they were in college. Now,
yeah.
when you think about it, who is Josie at her core when we first meet her, and how much of that identity is authentic versus performative for the comic?
When you say performative, what exactly do you mean?
As far as like I would say, as far as like the theme of the concept of it, how she's like the
Oh,
like the DJ is that, and also like the smartest one out of the bunch. How she basically builds everybody up, but yet she's
yeah,
disappeared from this.
that's a really fascinating perspective to look at it because you're right to say that she's pretty much the glue that holds this group of friends together.
Hmm.
In this, I mean, one of them. One of the things about being that age and being in university is everything's very immediate, right? Everything's happening right now. The future is something that happens later. You don't necessarily think about it the same way as you do when you're older,
Yeah.
but that immediacy, you become friends with people more easily, and you become friends with people because you have a shared experience. And in this case, it's the radio station, right? There's a metalhead DJ hanging out with a classical music DJ, hanging out with a dance music DJ. These people are ostensibly from different subcultures, which was a fun thing to do in creating characters because you get to have fun fashion, you get to have like fun turns of phrase, and there's
Hmm.
little personality quirks that you could pull from someone who's into goth music, someone who's into Britpop.
Yeah.
But they're all hanging out together because they have this commonality, which is the radio station is something they love. It's brought them together. But even more than that, they have this person who's this incredible fountain of energy and just head and shoulders smart. They're all smart people, but she's able to leverage her intelligence in a way that is maybe like another level from everyone else. And then when in putting the story together, something that was interesting for me to explore is what happens when that's gone.
Yeah.
What happens when that element in a tragic way is removed from the group of friends, and then you push them into the future, and instead now when they get back together 15 years later, instead of being held together by the glue of this person and her energy, they're held together by trauma,
Yeah.
a trauma that they all share together, and it stems from that person, but it's a different experience and it's a different vibe and it's a different way to relate to somebody. And by the time we catch up with everyone, 15 years later in their mid 30s, they've all got different personal and professional lives, but they've also had to live out this trauma in different ways, however they chose to process it.
Yeah.
And that's interesting for me to write about. This is so much. I mean, I don't like hurting characters just so that you have something to put in your story. Like I don't. That's not the appeal for me. But as someone, I mean, I'm sure all of us have experienced trauma in the past and had it form or at least shape how we interact with other people.
Yeah.
And going back to the people who were involved in a trauma that was shared and interacting with them again after being separate for so long, whether that was by choice or just by circumstance, that makes for a really interesting scenario to write about.
Yeah, because if I'm looking at it right now, the way that you pretty much constructed the story, even from issue one, issue two, is a lot of time jumping,
Yeah,
going from the '90s into the early 2000s and even into like 2011 to kind of like where we're currently at right now. How do you approach writing these alternate timelines so that they feel grounded instead of gimmicky?
we made some visual choices to kind of help the audience while they were reading the book. If you take a look at how the gutters are in the 90s versus how they are in 2011, you have a light color in the past, and then things are darker in the future. And at the same time, our colorist Maya Patrick, she went with a much more vibrant palette in the 90s because we're looking back on a past. We're thinking about a time when these people were all energetic and excited about the world. Then
Yeah.
when we get to your mid 30s, life has kind of beat you up a bit, and you don't see the world the same way. The light doesn't hit your eye the same way. So she went with a more muted palette for that time period. So we tried to create this visual sense of time, not just telling people, okay, now we're back in the 90s, now we're in 2011 again, but so that when you look at the page, your brain is able to instantly realize, okay, we've moved into a different era, into a different period of storytelling. So that was something that we worked on to make it feel more natural. So it show, don't tell, right? Like being able to illustrate a time period is a tricky thing. You can't just rely on fashion. You can't just rely on setting and how people are talking. You wanted to make it an entire environment.
Yeah, and it also in the same space with all the characters pretty much in detail. You get to see how their lives pretty much ended up.
Yeah,
One, of course, well, shoot, two are in corporate radio, now satellite radio. Um, One, of course, is married, although his wife has just passed. One is an influencer, and one is really much stuck in the past.
Yeah. It's, I mean, we all have friends like that, right?
We
Like
do.
that's the
Absolutely.
package, you know? There's the people who are still reliving their college years. There's the people who are trying to put that as far behind them as possible. And then there's people who they go on a path that is so unusual or unlike your own that you have trouble relating to it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And these were all fun to do. We got a little early on the influencer thing because I really feel like, you know, the fun thing about creating an alternate future is you can just do whatever you want. I mean, if there's a world where you can talk to the dead, then maybe other things are a little bit different too.
Oh yeah.
So we got some freedom with that. It's like the 2011 that we all experienced, but it's not exactly like that. So that was fun to put in. Um, but in issue 3, it's really the first time where all the adults, or I say adults, all the 30-year-old adults are together again for the first time in the same room since the tragedy that happened to their friend group. So that pushes a lot of the action and storytelling in issue 3. And we also get to see unresolved conflict from the past as well. Like maybe things that have been simmering below the surface for a lot of people all these years. They finally get a chance to say what they're really thinking, and they finally get a chance to, now they have the confidence to bring these things forward, whereas maybe in the past they would just let it lie.
Yeah, what I found interesting, of course, going from issue 1 to issue 2, especially with the cliffhangers and how they were pretty much kind of plotted throughout the series, is that when you come to find out that Josie didn't perish, and then also even coming around to the second conclusion that pretty much at the end of the day, even they were trying to she was what's her face was trying to communicate with her, and
Yeah.
yeah, and then essentially it was like we've been trying to figure out, but she's actually there's no way she could be dead. We would know offhand. So either she's just pretty much disappeared, or it's pretty much all for naught exactly what you're doing. So the full bait and switch of basically waiting that long for that one day to where you have a chance to speak to the dead, and it'd be like, well, it's not anybody turning you away. It's not anybody that wants to speak with you. There's just nobody here. So
And that person's waited so long because of the
right.
guilt that they felt,
So
and
it's like you've wasted time.
yeah, I mean, if you think about it, guilt is wasted time, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not an emotion that is positive. It's not something that helps you build anything about yourself. I'm not saying that it's ever an unwarranted emotion, but I don't think that it's something that I think there are more constructive ways to deal with regret and guilt than to just dwell on it, you know. And I tried to show in the book about how that affected Michelle. I mean, in a lot of ways, Michelle is the character that kind of brings the reader in as the focal point of the story, just kind of driving the perspective of what we're looking at. She's a bit of an open book. Not she has convictions and she has things that she needs to get out there, but she's really I don't know, like a substitute for the reader in some ways. So to make her someone who's more beaten down by life than perhaps anyone else we've encountered in the story, and someone who's finally made the choice to. I mean, imagine you make a choice to get over something, and then, like you said, you're slapped in the face and told, "No, you can't get over it." Your path to easing your conscience is like just close to you.
Yeah.
What does that do to you as a person? And that, I mean, there are a lot of ways you can encounter that in life. It doesn't have to be talking to the dead, right? You can try for redemption and not be able to achieve that, not be able to find that. That's pretty rough.
And even in the other case with Michelle, like she's been feeling this guilt for this entire time,
Yeah.
where the rest of the group is just immeasurable sadness, even though the trauma is pretty much shared. So now when we get to issue 3, she has to share with this group that, hey, we were wrong the entire time.
And not only were we wrong, we have no idea what happened.
Nothing.
We were certain about something in our own past that has been shown to be completely up in the air, right? And that's, I mean, as a revelation, that's something that you have. Again, I was saying earlier, this is a group that was once defined by their shared friendship and is now defined by a shared trauma. And then to be told that what you share didn't happen, I
Yeah.
mean, what's linking these people together, and what are you going to do about it? Like how are each of these individuals going to react to that revelation, and then what are they going to decide to do to try and either fix the situation or deal with it emotionally themselves?
True. And it's almost, it brings me back to another question when I started reading the book. It's like, Josie, what is she running from internally and externally at the start of the story? And when we get to 2011, what is she still running from?
Mm, mm. Well, hopefully enough people are going to be interested in that to pick up the new issue.
True. True.
That's the goal, right?
It, it,
Get a hook inside and then keep pulling that hook towards the end of the story.
that's the thing. It's always what do they call it? Just holding the carrot out, but you don't let them get too much.
Yeah,
And it's good to feel that way because I still feel like the questions are that much more pure. Like how you're making it. How do you balance making Josie flawed enough to feel real, but still compelling as the protagonist in the story?
yeah. It's. I tried to make each of these people real and relatable, and it's not hard to make young university students real and relatable because all human beings are flawed, but when we're that age, we're not
Yeah.
necessarily aware of our own flaws, so we just project them all over the place, right? We're just continually pushing out our bullshit, and
Mm-hmm.
as a result, people get hurt, relationships fray, that kind of stuff. You eventually learn how to be a person, how to be a person in society, how to be a good friend, right? So when they're young, it's easier to write that kind of thing. It's easier to get those flaws out, and you can make them interesting, and you can make them. When someone has a flaw, it doesn't necessarily mean you don't want to spend time with them.
Yeah.
It just means you got to protect yourself against whatever that flaw might be if you have to. So it's learning those kinds of things, and it's fun to write those kind of characters because writing a perfect character super boring. Nothing interesting about a
True.
perfect person.
What even more broad than that is the themes in which you created because I'm not sure which is like the central theme to the story because they almost dive in between the first two books. It's like the themes become more important to the series as they progress, especially regarding trauma, as we've talked about, identity, basically for who Josie is, and the constant memory that's haunting Michelle of Josie. So
Yeah,
it's like
and go ahead, go ahead.
no, so it's like those three things intertwined.
If you exist only in memory, you're no longer in control of your own identity, right?
Yeah,
Because who you were is and who you were perceived to be has been captured by someone's memory,
yeah,
and now you live on inside that person. So as the years go by, that perception can shift. It can change as the person who's remembering shifts and changes, right?
hmm,
And if you have a group of people who are all remembering somebody, they could all be remembering that somebody differently from their own perspectives. But I really also wanted to focus on friendship and how mutable friendship can be, how it can change. Even when you think something will never, even when you think you have a relationship that will never go away, it will never be, and it will never weaken. It will always be as strong as it was when you were first meeting that person and first getting to know them. Looking into a future where that's no longer the case.
yeah,
I'm personally very lucky in the sense that I have very strong friendships with people who've known me since I was 5 years old.
hmm,
And we're scattered throughout the world now, but I'm talking to these people daily, weekly, and I'm blessed by that. I feel like that's important to me, but I've also realized how rare that is. And I talk to a lot of people who don't have friendships that go that far back. And so I wanted to bring that perspective to this book and be like, hey, I have known people my entire life. And yeah, it changes. And sometimes you're not friends with these people anymore for things that you could never have predicted. And so all of that is kind of being explored in Dead Air. That's something that was important to me to put out there.
true. Now, when we're talking about the challenges that a relationship could possibly cause for Josie, which would you say that Michelle's relationship challenges Josie the most?
It's I hadn't thought about it that way. Um, when I was writing the book,
Hmm.
I wanted to have Josie be this, genius person, really smart at the things she's interested in. But I also wanted to have a foil for her in the group,
Yeah.
someone who could meet her intellectually. And for me, that was Esmeralda as a character.
Yeah. Okay.
Someone who is just as smart, maybe doesn't have the same extroverted personality,
Yeah.
but is able to keep pace, and kind of question what Josie's up to. And that's something I weaved into the story. There's some more of that in issue 3. Just that, you know, Josie's off doing her thing, building her stuff, asking her questions, trying to figure out what's going on with the friend group. And Esmeralda's like right there the whole time, being like, "Are you sure you should do this? Maybe we should do it this way. You know, is it really practical? The choices you're making."
Yeah.
She lives in a more rigid mentality, but she's intellectually right there with Josie. So having these two characters who are, I wouldn't, they're not opposites because they're very very similar, but how they interface with the world is different.
Mm-hmm.
That was interesting for me. The having her with Michelle, her relationship with Michelle, again, Michelle is again more like the audience, more like the reader.
Yeah.
So I wanted her to be broader, able to ask questions if she doesn't understand stuff. Not necessarily on the same wavelength as Josie, even though they're very good friends, but someone who is able to ask a question when you need to, so that in the story we can understand what's going on with Josie, because we don't
Yeah.
have the X-ray into her brain because she's maybe operating on a different wavelength.
Well, there's even the concept of in issue 3, because we talked about it even in issue 1, that basically the aspect of rejection.
Hmm.
So when we're going into issue 3, say for instance, they do all find Josie, and who's to say that she even wants to be found? Like,
That's
is
a really
she
good point.
basically, is she defining herself? Is she more defined through isolation, or were the connections just a little bit too much for her?
Who are the people we remember when we meet them again,
Yeah.
right? And if we never meet that person again, they stay as we remember them. But if you do encounter them again, you're forced to take in new information. You're forced to change your perception of somebody. You can't dig your heels in and say, "No, I only remember you." It's like a high school reunion, right? You go back and you have all these preconceived notions of who these people were, and then you discover, to your surprise, even though it shouldn't be surprising, that they've led completely full lives in like the 20 years since you last
Right.
saw them. And that can be something similar when someone is missing from your life traumatically, and if they come back, you're going to have to deal with the fact that they've been living without you.
Mm.
And that can be hurtful to some people. That can be a source of joy and comfort to others. It's all about how you approach it.
Eh, Another thing about Michelle as well, the story explores the idea. I mean, she's the audience. Like, she's almost like our eyes and ears throughout this whole saga, because we're experiencing it kind of like first person through her guilt. How does her story explore the idea of being heard versus being actually understood? And I feel like I'm gonna see more of that in issue 3. No, what was it? I was saying, like, how does Michelle's story explore the idea of being heard versus being actually understood? Because she's going to have to be confronted by all these friends really
Yeah,
soon,
yeah.
especially in issue 3. It's like, I've kind of hit an epiphany, like at the moment, and I found all this out about Josie. You don't even have to believe me.
Mm.
Like, you just got to understand what I'm about to break down for you guys.
And
And
that's something that I explore with the group being back together for the first time, because she's able to confide in TJ, a friend of hers who she stayed in touch with over the years, who's part of that group. But as you say, like, talking to a friend is one thing, talking to everyone at the same time, people that you don't really know anymore,
yeah,
not understanding how they might react to you, that's a very different type of bravery. And I think for Michelle, she's fueled by the fact that if there's any chance that she can somehow have Josie in her life again, or settle the feelings of guilt that she has about what happened to Josie, she's going to push for that. She's going to get past her fears, get past her stress level, whatever it is, and she's going to try to make that happen.
mm. Now, what do you hope readers feel about Josie, even if they don't fully understand everything yet?
I mean, I hope they find her interesting, and I hope they find her interesting enough to want to find out what happened to her. That's like ultimately, if you have a character who goes missing or there's a trauma involving that character, they need to be compelling enough for people to care. If they don't care, it's like, okay, whatever. It doesn't matter to me what happens moving forward. If the whole story is based around the idea of this tragic event, you need the person to whom the tragedy befalls to be interesting. So that's what I tried to do. I tried to pour a lot of um, interesting aspects or character traits that I found interesting into this person. Give her enough of an air of mystery where, like, you could tell she's operating on a level that's different from that of her friends, and you want to kind of find out more about that. You want to be around this person, have that magnetism effect apply to you as a reader, just as it does to all the people that she's keeping together as a friend group.
Mm. Now, do you think that the challenges that Esmeralda has built by being somewhat of a peer that was like kind of like similar to her could draw a reaction from their meeting later on in life?
I definitely think so. I mean, especially if you're someone who has a more ordered mind, and is used to seeing the world in a certain way, it can be difficult to accept a conclusion that seems to fly in the face of everything you thought you knew. That's a real challenge, even for really smart people, maybe especially for really smart people. Because if you think you have everything figured out and you're used to being told that you have everything figured out, it can be tough to realize you don't.
For sure. Now, of course, this all being circulated, this entire story, based around this college radio station, and I feel as though a lot of people, for the most part, have forgotten what college radio is.
Yeah, it's a better art form in many ways.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, it used to have its own charts.
That's right. Before MTV had, or not MTV, sorry, before Billboard had modern rock,
Mm-hmm.
which I believe started in the 90s, early 90s, mid 90s, or any alternative rock charts. It was pretty much college radio play that would determine how well bands outside the mainstream were doing.
Mm.
And it was, I mean, charts are pretty sketchy, especially back then, before SoundScan.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with SoundScan?
I am familiar.
Yeah, so before SoundScan, it was a lot of guesswork. It was a lot of people handing envelopes of cash to other people and saying, our band is doing really well,
Hey,
and then, exactly. And then SoundScan comes in, and all of a sudden they have this actual data from record stores, and it turns out everybody in the world was buying either country or hip-hop. Those were the two genres that were taking over the music industry, and we couldn't pretend that people were listening to Poison or Motley Crue anymore. They had to actually acknowledge what was going on. But in the background of all of that, you had college radio, which was completely outside the mainstream because there was really no one watching over the stations deciding an overarching strategy of what should be played. You could listen to a folk show, and then you're listening to a rap show, and then you're listening to an industrial rock show. And that could be like a 3-hour block on a Thursday night. That's fun. It's a bit schizophrenic. It can be confusing and off-putting, but there are people who enjoy that. It's a great way to discover new music. And nowadays, music has become so splintered in terms of how we discover it that that kind of spirit doesn't really exist anymore. It's more of an algorithmically driven discovery process for a lot of people, which is too bad, I think. I don't have a problem with people finding music however they want to, but there should be multiple ways to do it. It shouldn't just be one way.
Yeah, because it used to be, of course, a lot more organic. It's like sometimes you wouldn't even hear the song, but midway you might have missed the beginning of the song, but you was like, "Dang, I really like the hook to this one. Hold on." But you would have to wait probably like a good 3 days for that same song to come back on. They're like, "That's the one from earlier. Hold on."
I remember as a kid. I mean, this really dates me, but like at the end of the year, there would be these on music TV as well as on the radio. They'd have these year-end wrap-up shows, right, where they would play like the 50 tracks of the year that they thought were best for that station. And I would be like, I would have my cassette tape with my finger hovering above record, and I would be waiting to get the songs I wanted, wait for DJ to stop talking, and he try to time it perfectly. And that was maybe the only way. I lived in a rural area. I didn't have a lot of access to music stores and whatnot. I had a limited summer job budget, So this is a way I was pre MP3 that I was able to be exposed to new music.
For sure. I mean, look, we could probably talk about this a lot, especially due to the fact that a lot of people don't understand the patience of a lot of older people. And that's because we had to wait on the radio for our favorite song to come on to record it.
Yeah.
So we could sit there with our fingers for hours.
Yeah.
Like, whoop, it's coming, yo.
Yeah.
Now, you did something recently to where you put out this Kickstarter update that I did not know about Canadian college radio.
Yeah.
And how that's pretty much mapped out due to certain constructs of how the province, the country of Canada, basically where a artist performed, or how basically the stuff was getting played on the radio in Canada. Now, the only thing I know of Canada is Much Music.
So Much Music, and in Quebec, where I live, Music Plus, which is like the French version of that. I mean, they're bound by this thing called the CRTC, which is like the American FCC in a lot of ways. And Canada happens to live next door to an enormous market, the United States, which produces a lot of cultural content. So when your country in that position, you have to take steps in your own country to preserve, or at least give your own artists a chance to be able to compete with, we're 40 million people next to 350 million people. So they came up with the idea of Canadian content rules, where if you're a broadcaster operating in Canada, a certain percentage of what you put on the air, whether it's TV, whether it's radio, it has to be from a Canadian artist. And they define Canadian artists or Canadian music in specific ways. They have this thing called MAPL, which is like conveniently spells maple, which is kind of a funny coincidence for Canada. But the music would have to be, the artist would have three, it used to be three of the four. Now it's two of the four. But it would be, the musician is Canadian, the song itself was written by a Canadian, the recording place was in Canada, and I'm spacing on what the fourth one is. So it's for live performance. So there are some American songs which, by virtue of the fact the artist might be American, but the songwriter was Canadian and they did a show in Canada, that would count as Canadian content. So that would satisfy the rule. The reason this becomes really important in radio is when you're, a teenager or in university, you're still bound by the same rule. It affects top 40 stations. It affects college radio stations. So we would have when I started out, it was a binder, and then they eventually moved to a computerized system. But we would have to keep track of every song that we played and what time we played it, and then we had to also ensure that the percentage of what we played, it was about 33%, had to be Canadian. And that meant we had to get really creative, because you don't want to just keep playing the same Canadian songs over and over, the same mainstream stuff. Yeah, it was fun in that sense, because I got to discover all these bands I never would have found. And that's the entire point of the exercise, right? It's like you surface these recordings and these artists that otherwise would have been overwhelmed by much louder artists, by artists with bigger marketing budgets, or artists that were in the mainstream. So it was a great way to promote Canadian content, Canadian music. And it was a great way for me to discover Canadian artists and find new and creative ways to work them into the music I was listening to.
That is incredible. And to be honest, I never looked at it that way. I would think of that from the concept of, we have Saturday Night Live, but they have SCTV. And SCTV was hilarious still.
Yeah, and ended up being really influential. A lot of those people ended up, cross-pollinating.
Oh my God!
Yeah. To this day, there's SCTV performers out there, which is really crazy to think about, because that was a long time ago, like 50 years.
Yeah, for sure. Now back to these last round of questions. Now, if for Dead Air, if Josie could interview anybody, dead or alive, who was she choosing? Why?
Oh man, that's I don't have a ready answer for that, and I probably should. I think she would probably, because they have to be dead, right? I think she would probably go back and try to talk to what is her name? I want to say Babbage.
Mm-hmm.
One of the early, no, it's not Babbage. It's Ada Lovelace. One of the original people, the women at the forefront of computer science in the 30s and 40s. It was Charles Babbage, and I want to say Ada Lovelace. There's a coding language now called ADA, which I believe is named after her. She would probably want to talk to someone like that, someone who was like her, undeterred by anything in their pursuit for knowledge and information and curiosity. And I think that's probably who she would target.
Okay. Now,
Whether she would pick up, I don't
true,
know.
true. Now, is Josie someone who finds answers or someone who learns to live with the questions?
I think that for her, questions are a means to an end, and the end would be an answer.
Excellent.
That's what she would go for.
Excellent. Excellent. Benjamin, I appreciate you doing this with me. Thank you.
I always have a great time, and thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. Of course, Dead Air 3 is still live on Kickstarter. I believe there was it what, a couple weeks left still?
Yeah, I think it goes to about the 27th of May, so we got 2.5 weeks left.
I still got till the end of the month.
DeadAirComic.com. You can always find the Kickstarter there. It's probably the easiest way.
For sure. Benjamin, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Definitely for anybody out there that hasn't gotten their hands on Dead Air issue 1 and 2, you do have a bundle to where you could do a catch up, to where you could get your hands on issues 1, 2, and 3 once it's released. So that's always good for everybody out there that's got to get their hands on like the full totality of the book. So that's always a gift. All right. So for everybody out there, myself, James Grandmaster Facts Voice, Benjamin Hunting, for everybody here at the Facts Project, go get Dead Air issues 1 through 3. Go, feel free to read the whole thing. If you had a chance to basically read both issues and want to get your hands on 3, you can do so as well. For all of us here, we will see you guys next time. We are out.